Imagine waking in the middle of the night, not from a startling noise or a bad dream, but because your body simply knew it was time to be awake. This wasn't a sign of insomnia for people in the Middle Ages. It was a normal and expected part of their nightly routine. For centuries, across various cultures, people experienced what historians now call segmented sleep, a pattern of sleeping in two distinct phases with a period of wakefulness in between. This unique rhythm reveals a fascinating side of pre-industrial life, showing us how people worked, worshipped, and lived in a world dictated by the cycles of the sun. For most of human history, from ancient times right up to the modern era, the idea of sleeping for a single, uninterrupted stretch of 8 hours was an anomaly. Instead, people followed a natural rhythm closely tied to the setting sun. Their first sleep began not long after nightfall, often in the early evening, especially during the long, dark nights of winter. This was a deep, restorative rest lasting about 3 to 4 hours. Then, guided by an internal clock rather than an alarm, they would awaken naturally in the middle of the night. This midnight waking was not seen as strange or problematic. Historical records from diaries, court documents, and even medical texts casually reference first and second sleep, showing that it was a universally understood pattern. A 16th century French physician, for example, noted that the time between these sleeps was ideal for study and quiet reflection. Even in ancient Roman writings, there are hints of a similar divided sleep pattern. Whether you were a farmer in rural England, a merchant in Florence, or a monk in a secluded monastery, this two-part sleep system was a fundamental part of life. The main reason for this was the absence of widespread artificial light. In a medieval village, once the sun set, a deep and profound darkness took over. Houses might have a small fire or a single candle, but these were costly to maintain. The body, unexposed to bright electric light, naturally became sleepy soon after nightfall, thanks to the hormone melatonin. It simply made sense to divide the long hours of darkness into two manageable blocks of rest, instead of trying to cram it all into one. This slower, darker world meant that time itself moved differently, and the hours after sunset were precious for winding down before the night's first rest. When the first sleep ended, the household would softly stir in the darkness. Small lights would be coaxed into existence, a flicker from a candle or the faint orange glow of a rekindled hearth. This was a unique liminal space, neither fully night nor morning, neither work nor rest. People woke up without urgency, guided by a rhythm that was in tune with the seasons. This period was a time for quiet industry and private rituals. Many people used this stillness for prayer, believing the midnight hours to be particularly sacred and that God was more attentive during the deep silence. Others attended to practical needs, adding wood to the fire to keep the family warm, checking on livestock, or tending to infants. Mothers, in particular, often used this time for nursing. It was also a cherished time for quiet reflection. Without the constant distractions of daylight, thoughts turned inward. People might recall their dreams, ponder problems from the day, or plan for the one ahead. Sometimes, in close-knit communities, neighbors might even visit one another. The glow of a neighbor's candle was a welcome sign of life in the encompassing darkness. This hour also provided a rare opportunity for privacy and intimacy between couples, away from the constant presence of family members who often shared beds. Far from being a waste of time, this middle-of-the-night period was a productive and meaningful part of life, a quiet interlude that our modern, constantly lit world has all but erased. Not everyone used this wakeful period for rest and reflection. For certain trades, the hours after the first sleep were the most productive. Bakers were a prime example. They would rise in the dark to knead dough and heat their ovens, ensuring fresh bread was ready for the morning market. Millers also worked at night, taking advantage of the cool, steady air for grinding grain. Watchmen were a key part of midnight labor in towns and cities. They patrolled the streets, guarded gates, and listened for signs of fire, one of the greatest fears of the time. They were among the few who experienced the quiet city under moonlight, its inhabitants sound asleep. Even in rural areas, Farmers might use this time to check on livestock, guard against predators, or prepare their tools. For these workers, the middle of the night was not a pause in life, but its engine, a period when the world was already in motion. Furthermore, the practice of shared beds was common, and the midnight waking became a time for social connection. In homes where several family members, servants, or even guests slept together, this quiet hour was an opportunity for conversation without the demands of the day. People would settle disputes, share stories, or simply enjoy each other's company in hushed tones. The bonds of family and community were quietly strengthened in the stillness of the night. The two-sleep rhythm began to fade in the 18th and 19th centuries, a casualty of sweeping technological and social changes. The arrival of gas street lighting and later electric bulbs meant that cities could now stay bright long after sunset. People no longer felt compelled to go to bed at nightfall. Evening hours filled with theater, coffee houses, and late-night socializing, pushing bedtime later and compressing the night into a single, continuous block of rest. The Industrial Revolution sealed the fate of segmented sleep. Factory work demanded standardized schedules and punctual starts. The luxury of waking in the middle of the night to linger by the hearth was incompatible with the early morning factory whistle. Employers needed workers to be alert and present for a full day, which meant encouraging a longer, uninterrupted sleep. Urban living also contributed, as crowded housing and increased noise made quiet wakefulness less appealing. By the early 20th century, the concept of first and second sleep had all but vanished from the common vocabulary, becoming a mere historical curiosity. Today, scientists are revisiting what the Middle Ages accepted as normal. Sleep researchers have found that when people are removed from artificial light and allowed to follow their natural rhythms, they often revert to a two-phase sleep pattern. Subjects in these experiments fall asleep soon after darkness, wake for about an hour in the middle of the night, then drift back into a second rest. This suggests that segmented sleep may be more aligned with our biology than the modern ideal of a straight 8 hours. What we often label as insomnia, waking in the night and being unable to fall back to sleep immediately, might in some cases be our body's natural inclination resurfacing. The story of two-phase sleep is more than a forgotten custom. It's a reminder that our ancestors lived in step with the natural world in ways we have almost erased. They saw the night as a layered experience, not a solid block of unconsciousness, and found value in the quiet space that existed between sleeps. In that pause, they prayed, worked, loved, and reflected, a rhythm that perhaps holds a lesson for us in our perpetually lit, fast-paced world.